Hello and welcome to this video. I have been thinking and cooking an idea. I put it in the oven a few days ago and it's just completely burnt to a crisp. So I thought that I would take it out and show it to you and say chew on this. Because I got snagged on a video that I saw, so I want to talk about it. It's not that deep, so I'm not gonna link the video, but I'll show some screenshots. I saw a video that asked the question, have we lost the art of drinking coffee? Well, I love coffee and I love internet take. I love a conclusion. So I clicked on the video, of course, and I watched the video. And to summarize, the video makes the observation that sugary latte, like banana fluff, cream pie, Oreo latte with oat milk, these kind of wild, wacky, Jimmy Neutron level experiment drinks that are being pumped out by I don't know, Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts or Burger King, even Taco Bell has got some type of coffee, I don't remember. So that all that starts to ignore the flavor of the coffee inside those drinks. Okay, so the creator of this video, I think, she wants to appeal to the coffee bean itself and the roasting method and the joy of actually tasting what coffee tastes like, the flavor of that, and is asking or challenging us to think about that experience. And so maybe the loss that she's talking about really is the actual taste of the coffee, and such coffee has now just transformed possibly into a simple vehicle for syrups and non-coffee flavors. So it's just, it's a second, it's an afterthought. So I thought that she was pretty balanced, and she talked about how she's a barista, so she makes those sugary drinks, and she also drinks them. She likes them, but that the coffee inside should also be good. So I thought that her kind of appealed to the integrity of the fundamental elements, the coffee. It was hard to argue with, and it had integrity. So that seemed very good. But, do you see, I was already snagged. I was caught, and my mind was already sliding, avalanching down the mountain, and there was something about it, her framing, that I couldn't get out of my head. And here's what it is. And because I'm not a little twerp, I didn't leave a comment on the video because she made a good video. Peace to her, and I'm not linking it. So I'm not a little twerp, but I am an overthinker, and so I am putting this on YouTube because I thought of a movie I had seen. Don't ask me the name. It's British. It has Olivia Colman in it, and it's one of them Charles Dickens, rainy, olden time kind of movies, like Victorian England. It's not great. But the detective guy, he's knocking on doors to find this girl, thinking that she might be in one of these fallen women's houses. And this was my first time hearing about this, even though I love history, where apparently Victorian times, the religious concept of the fallen woman, being a woman who had children outside of wedlock and stuff, typically, this concept of the woman fallen into disgrace from an ideal state. Now she's in the fallen women house. Okay, so instead of looking at these women like, okay, you're having a baby, so what? Now but the religious framework of this kind of lost purity. Now we have to be all sad. Oh, she's fallen. Oh, now the whole thing has to be depressing, right? So, my first thought, I'm gonna be honest, when I saw Have We Lost the Art of Coffee Drinking, I just pictured the banana Oreo slop coffee as our poor fallen woman. Just sad, depressing, having fallen from, some myth. So, here's why. Because I think that's a little bit unfair, but it's also a little bit fair. And here's why. I realized I was stuck on the video and like a little bit agitated by it, even though I agree with the sentiment, I feel it. Is that I realized that I am a little bit fatigued. I'm a little bit peeved off by this rhetoric that I kind of see a lot, which is that we have lost the art of fill in the blank. We've lost the art of fill in the blank, and I think it's worth thinking about. So, pulling things out of my brain storage unit, it's not just that I have been told that we've lost the art of coffee, but I've been told that we have lost the art of listening. We've lost the art of conversation. We've lost the art of reading, writing, gathering. We've lost the art of thinking itself. I've seen a lot of this, I would say, over the past, maybe a long time, 4 or 5 years, and I've seen these kind of takes a lot. And I have to say that these feel really good, in a bad way. Like, they feel very validating. We've lost the art of listening, conversation. They do feel good, or we've lost the art of drinking coffee. There's something about that as a statement that does feel validating, and it at least makes me feel seen in a certain way, and I imagine makes other people feel seen, their frustration feel seen in another way. Because I think these statements are making a really swift kick in the knee to kind of industrial scale, extractive, exploitative, capitalist society. And it feels really good to kick that in the kneecap. And I think that's what these kinds of things are. When we have kind of a thoughtless corporate extraction from culture and the world and these vultures left and right, and we're living in a society that in a lot of ways doesn't make people happy to the core, and does want to give you a quick sale over ritual and meaning, or feels like they're trying to get ritual and meaning and insert their own product into it, So the enemy, we have to build a myth in order to have the bad guy, the bad element, steal it away, so then we feel seen and justified in our emotions. So you have to have implicit, I think, in this Have We Lost the Art of Drinking Coffee is a myth, and it's never spoken, but if you look at the comments of this video, it's there, where this triggers a myth instantly of a kind of slow drinking coffee, drinking black coffee, where time belongs to you more, a more humble, communal way of having coffee, in the sense that, this is an ideal, we're having this around the breakfast table with people that you love, But even though I share that emotional sentiment a lot, and I can kind of understand maybe how it's functioning, or I'm assuming that I understand it, I want to reject the sentiment of loss in this case, and I think in a lot of other cases. And because I'm thinking of the fallen women and how they have come from, fallen far from this ideal state. And the tragedy is, of course, that ideal state is a myth, and it isn't there, and it serves a particular system of control and at the expense of women. So in the case of coffee, if we have this implicit myth and we're saying that we've lost that and now we're somewhere new because the enemy has brought us there, it makes me feel good because we live in the mechanisms that bring us lower, that we intuitively feel bring us down. They take from us. They don't pay anyone well, so, these big chain places. It feels good to acknowledge that we are brought lower. This kind of mass industrial pumping out of coffee. However, I think about that myth, and you investigate that myth, at least in America, the art of drinking coffee. I find it interesting to examine, have we ever had it? Like, what really are you asking me to mourn, right? Okay, the first thing that comes to mind is coffee coming from overseas, colonizers bringing it, and then we're drinking it as we expand west. Okay, drinking it as they go that way, mostly to keep people awake so they can work. And coffee is this gasoline, this fuel idea, fuel and coffee. And I do think of the myth of like the diner, this image of diner coffee, black coffee, kind of keeping people going. I think of Folgers, at least in the American, cowboy myth, cowboy coffee. Coffee is interesting. These images are very interesting, and they're kind of depends on how you look at it. And so here's really my beef, because this is all like too big to put on this one video, because she's meaning it differently. But if somebody is telling me that I've lost something, they're telling me to grieve. And this kind of atmosphere of loss it's very vague. It creates vagary and hopelessness. Because I think it makes a kind of cloud when you line it all up, but we've lost all this stuff. And you're asking me to mourn something instead of looking at it investigatively, if that's a word. So this mourning over cultural life, the specific images of what cultural life is, the sitting around the table drinking coffee, I think in some ways it makes people, at least me, feel politically and culturally, creatively impotent. Because again, it just is we're supposed to be kind of sad about this image of what we've lost, instead of investigating what's going on and investigating both this where we are now and that myth. Why did we think that we were ever there? Because I think what's going on at the heart is I feel like we have things that we've actually lost. These kind of very clear ways that we have lost. And a loss of connection with nature, with the natural world, and we're losing nature. We're losing it. And we're losing its diversity, and we are destroying our planet in all kinds of ways, multifaceted ways. And we're losing people. So there's really things that are happening that warrant extreme grief. And grief is very important when you're processing these things. And so I think grief absolutely has a place. I have a little quote, actually, to help me with this, from a book I'm reading called Cosmic Connections. And it's pretty much, when I hear that we've lost the art of drinking coffee, I know that that's like a myth, and that's not true. don't think we've had the art of coffee ever in the United States, at least, and cafe culture is still very much alive in other parts of the world. I think why that video feels so good to watch anyway is because she's actually talking about this. So I'm going to read what she's talking about. And what I think people are talking about when they say, well, we've lost XYZ, they're talking about this, which is a big one. So Charles Taylor, in this book, Cosmic Connections, he's talking about how people feeling that a traditional way of life involving certain stable relation to what we now call environment was, and of course is, being sapped in several ways at once. It's being sapped through the growth of cities, with the resulting atomization theorized a century later by Simmel, through industrialization, which created greater and greater urban environments of unprecedented ugliness and inexpressive of any human meanings, through more and more economic or instrumental management of rural estates geared to increasing wealth, not to fostering community or doing justice to the beauties of nature. The old ways were also being sapped by the advance of certain technologies, for instance railways, and the resulting speed of travel and communication. All this was lived by many people with a sense of loss, and with a corresponding aspiration to recover a contact with nature, which the large-scale, successful application of industrial reasoning was destroying. This sense of loss and longing to recover the link to nature was a central aspiration of the Romantic period and remains powerful today. So, he is talking about a kind of more critical, deeper sense of existential loss that has propelled art movements. He's talking about Romantic poetry in this book, but right now I think that it's propelling many people politically on both the left and both the right, this sense of we're losing something critical. We're losing something very critical. I think that because that's true, at least I have a sentiment of loss, a very large one, existentially. Because I think that's true, I know how being in a state of grief makes me feel, and how that I process that. I'm actually very wary now when I'm told that we have lost something. I think it's a tricky thing, and we have to be careful with it, because we're absolutely losing our connections to each other and to nature and to ourselves, and having ideas about who we are presented from kind of corporate binary thinking, analytical, hyper-analytical standpoints that I think are a threat to the way in which we emerge from the world organically. And I think some of the frameworks we have are not generous to human flourishing. But because of that, I am very careful when I have been told that we've lost something, and then I've lost something, because I feel like many of these statements are emotional, and they actually cloud or get in the way of the ability to really investigate what is going on, and to, instead of framing it, for example, with coffee, instead of framing it like let's grieve the fact that we've lost the art of drinking coffee, I don't think we need to make a fallen woman out of the banana Oreo latte. I think a more helpful way to frame that is how can we create the art of coffee and not lost the art of drinking it, but how can we honor the concept of coffee from a flavor profile standpoint, where we're appreciating the bean, we're appreciating the roast, but also instead of viewing the banana the banana Oreo latte as the fallen woman, rescue even the dignity of that. So, because on one hand what's going on is actually interesting, it is taste, It's just new experiments with flavor, and we want to also honor the coffee. So if the problem is this kind of slopification that comes from certain things like Burger King or McDonald's coffee, what about the kind of rise of what I see as newer cafe culture that we have now, which is like matcha and these other kinds of drinks that we're still talking to each other, we're still creating something interesting. You're making new drinks where coffee is one component, and the idea is to make something that goes with that coffee, which I think she's, again, that original creator wouldn't argue against that. One more example, if I'm told that we have lost the art of listening because, you look around you and everyone's got their headphones in and everybody is, rude or ignoring each other, my first thought would be to reject that statement, because have we lost the art of listening? What do you mean, Have we ever had the art of listening? And you'd have to start to define that. I would imagine that empathy is a basic feature of good listening and openness. Well, has American culture ever had that? Or has that always been a struggle to try and be heard in the United States? When I hear, we've lost the art of listening, I think, when did we have it? When did we have it? I am imagining that higher empathy and higher openness, traits of openness and listening, I would imagine that is that compatible with a country that is so riddled with conflict, both domestically and internationally, such as the US? Is there always a tension with this fight for rights within the system? Again, so loss rhetoric at this point, loss rhetoric that invites me into a place of mourning and grief I'm wary of, because I don't know if that's helpful to thinking about problems, thinking about history. And I think sometimes thinking about things historically can lead to insight about, okay, if you feel like we've got a very negative culture of judgment, how can we tackle that positively? I don't know if it's from a place of mourning the loss of a myth, as opposed to getting rid of the myth and going into what is going on in American culture at any given point. What is the history of tension here? And going into it from that investigative angle, it paints a more, I think, kind of sober but more robust image of what is actually going on, what we're actually dealing with. So, anyway, wrapping up my little overcooked burnt nugget, I do think when she says we've lost the art of coffee, when you hear that, I think that's an emotional appeal, and it's just meant to feel good. But at the same time, I'm wary, because I think it's such a Christian sentiment, is to be like, devastated by this concept of lost purity, as opposed to dealing with a really complex tangle of tension that exists and I think has historically existed as we live in these environments, and that elements of environments can facilitate human connection and health and well-being, and elements of environments can completely take that away and can incentivize the opposite, competition, greed, judgment. So that's it. I don't think the banana sugar puff cream Oreo latte is a fallen woman. I think she's her own freaking thing that deserves to be wrestled with and looked at complexly. But I think the sentiment at the core of that critique is a sense of loss that has to do with something else, something much bigger that I have, and I'm sure many people watching have, because it's true, and grief is important for that, and I think it clouds thinking when it's overextended. So that's my overcooked theory and idea. I hope that made sense. I'm sure that there is room for analysis, absolutely room for analysis. I am thinking perhaps take some more from this book, which is about sentiment of loss that births art, and specifically poetry. But maybe I can type up my thoughts in a Substack article. I think the clearer I'm able to make them, then the better it will be for someone to critique them. So maybe my goal, I think I've said what I mean in this video, and I've tried to be fair, but you know, maybe there's areas I could tighten it up. We'll see. But I hope that made sense. I hope that it was generous, because grief is important. I want to acknowledge it, but I am wary, so I hope that was clear. We will see. I am drinking just a little home coffee with oat milk. I'm sure this is somebody's fallen woman, but what can you do? It's pretty good. It's decent. I just made it at home, but I will be having more coffee, and I'll still be thinking about this idea. I'm sure if I write it, it will have even more in it, because I will have thought of more. Because you thought it was out of the oven, but even a burnt crisp of a crumb can go right back in there and be cooked again. Shout out to you if you have that kind of overthinking brain. I hope that you are doing super good, and that you are having some rest and relaxation, at least a little bit, and hopefully reading a good book and watching good videos, and, you know, spending time with people and enjoying the weather. It's very hot here. In fact, there's a little fan that I can't turn off, so I apologize if you can hear it. But I can't turn it off because it's freaking hot out here. It's freaking hot. It is like summer came so quick. Anyway, I'm rambling now because I'm clinging onto our time together. But I will dip. I will say goodbye. And I will absolutely be back with more videos. There is no stopping the train. I'm sure I'll be back very soon with something else. God knows what. So, I really appreciate you being here and listening to me. Let me know if you've got any thoughts. And I will say good night.